Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
My apologies that I'm running a bit late. Welcome to everyone. MashaAllah, Muhsin Manie. Assalamu alaikum, Muhsin. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. It's not on. Okay, tafadhal ya akhi.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والإمام المرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم اغفر له وارحمه واسكنه في الجنة اللهم اغفر له وارحمه واسكنه في الجنة اللهم اغفر له وارحمه واسكنه في الجنة سيد محمد نور رحمة الله عليه من ريان ماني إمام ريان ماني المرحوم الله grant him a high place in Jannah
Amin, amin.
بإذن الله الكريم اللهم ربي زدنا علما اللهم ربي زدنا علما اللهم ربي زدنا علما وارزقنا فهما واغفر لنا ذنوبنا وذنوب والدينا ومشايخنا والمسلمين أجمعين ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وادخلنا الجنة مع الأبرار يا عزيز يا غفار يا رب العالمين اللهم اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط النور صراط الحق صراط البركة من النبيين والصديقين والشهداء والصالحين وحسن أولئك رفيقا وكفى بالله عليما إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم ألا إن أولياء الله لا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون الذين آمنوا وكانوا يتقون بخير دعوة فيها سبحانك اللهم وتحيتهم فيها السلام والآخر دعوة من الحمد لله رب العالمين.
Shukran,
بسم الله.
shukran.
عفوا حبيبي.
Ya akhi. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raise your status. Alhamdulillah. Shukran. Welcome to everyone. We are tonight going to start implementing our understanding of the Tawheed and the names that we have done up to now. You will find that now we're going to deal with something called the Nafs. And the Nafs is something that we must get to understand, because we are not able to fight anything. Let me just put up the screen. You see, anything, if you come into a room and there's 10 people there, out of the 10, 2 people are your enemies. They're trying to hurt you or kill you or do bad things to you. And you don't know what your enemy looks like or how he behaves or anything about the enemy. How can you fight and protect yourself against that? Now, we find ourselves in a very similar situation. We talk about the nafs as something that we should fight, something that we should protect ourselves against, yet we know very little about the nafs. So our exercise is to try and get a proper understanding of the nafs so that we are able to fight it in the correct manner. And there's certain methods that are being proposed on how we should actually fight it. But before we can fight it, we first have to know what it is, and then to recognize it when we see it, and then to fight it in the way that we are advised to fight it. Now, the Quran speaks about the nafs in the Quran and Sunnah. In the Quran alone, nafs is mentioned 295 times. I'm not going to go through all the different ayah in the Quran and the hadith now. We will come back to some of these. I'm just putting it up so that we can get an idea that it is something that's being mentioned as a very important thing. Something that is evil and something that we should fight against. So we will go and use some of these ayah and hadith and refer back to it at the appropriate time. But just to give you a kind of general idea, I couldn't put all the different Quranic ayah and hadith up here. It would be so much, and then it would be just putting up the hadith without explaining where and how we should apply it. Now, before I even attempt to outline, I would like to know whether there's anyone or who would like to venture, would like to suggest what the nafs is. What is the nafs? If we talk about the nafs, what is the nafs? I'm going to open the floor immediately to find out if there's anyone who would like to start off. And I want people to volunteer. Otherwise, I'm going to call on them. And I don't want to call on people if they're not ready. So I want you to volunteer what you think the nafs is. And this is not a test. This is just so that I can know how to proceed from here, but to get an idea of what the participants understand by the concept of the nafs. So the floor is open now. Anyone?
So,
Yes, Pita Yahya?
so my brother, Imam Salie, Imam Manie, I think the nafs is to do with the body in itself. Firstly, your tummy, then your mind, your liver. It's got different types of egos and different types of stages that comes into effect. So if you maybe like, for instance, if you are somebody that likes to eat a lot of red meat, it makes you somebody that becomes animalistic.
Okay.
And yeah, it makes you like somebody that's animalistic. The less red meat we eat, and we eat maybe, for instance, fish, chicken, or white and vegetables, etc., then it's more like, and being obedient to the commands of Allah is you are defeating your nafs. You are conquering your nafs if you submit to the will of Allah, because through that exercise of that 5 times a day salat, it's almost like it's keeping your nafs in, how can I say,
In check.
obedience.
Yeah.
You defeat your nafs.
Okay.
This is my understanding. I don't know if I'm speaking correct, but Imam, can my elaborate?
Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah. Is there anyone else who would like to make a comment?
I suppose the nafs, one can equate that to your basic desire or your needs. Can be physical, emotional, but mostly it's considered like negative cravings and socially unacceptable. So we always trying to control these desires or needs because it's not considered acceptable behavior socially or religiously.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yes, Assalamu alaikum to the Salie and everybody. I think for me, the Nafs is an entity, and I'm going to be very cautious in what I'm saying now, but I'm going to say it anyway. It is an entity that is almost in as a rival to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He seeks, or the Nafs seeks various things, like Sidi Yahya and Sister Aisha was mentioning. It drives one to one's desires, whether it's overeating or oversleeping or overspeaking. It incites, depending on the level or purity or the control of the nafs, it will drive one towards animalistic instincts. Yeah.
Okay. I think you've all of you have spoken on the issue, and yes, there are aspects of what you have said that's 100% correct. But now we're going to try and put all of those things together and add a few things to it so that when we finish with this session on the nafs, you all have, or we all have, and I include myself, have a proper idea of what the nafs is. There should be no gaps. This is your enemy. You must recognize your enemy wherever you see your enemy so that you know how to behave towards your enemy. Don't attack the wrong person thinking that's the enemy. So you better make sure. So let's go over to the slides now. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, when he came from one of the wars, he told the Sahaba that you have returned from the lesser jihad. Now these people have put their lives at stake. They fought in the way of Islam, and some of them have even died. And you know, if you in jihad and you get killed, you go straight away to Jannah, you're a shaheed. But yet Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that was the lesser jihad, the smaller one. The bigger battle, the greater war, the greater jihad is the jihad of the nafs. Now we must understand that is like a foundation for how we should proceed in our lives. Yeah, Rasulullah doesn't speak out of his own. You must remember that anything that Rasulullah said or did in his life, everything was inspired by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for him to say and do certain things because he was supposed to show us how to live the Quran. Allah wanted to make things clear for us on how we should live our lives so that we can become successful on this dunya in a way that's pleasing to Allah. So Allah gave us the Quran, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us Rasulullah to show us how to live the Quran if we want to be successful, both in terms of what we should do and what we should not do. So here Rasulullah makes a very great statement, very important statement. And many of us know this hadith. The jihad against the nafs is the biggest jihad. But keep that in mind, how important this is, that we actually understand and know what the nafs is. Now, I'm not going to go into all of the detail because we're going to cover some of these other aspects later on. But in the way that the nafs is referred to both in the hadith and the sunnah, it's got three very specific meanings. The one meaning is what we have alluded to, and that is our lower animalistic instincts, desires and passions and cravings and yearnings, all of those. But it's also used, nafs is also used to refer to the soul. And then on other occasions, it's used to refer to the person. Now, we will come to that. So it's got three very specific meanings. What we are going to focus on is that jihad that Rasulullah referred to in the hadith. The biggest jihad. What is that jihad? Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created human beings with almost two opposite components within themselves. What is referred to as your inner and your outer, or your animal and your angelic nature. Human beings both have that. So they have the potential to become as low as an animal, whatever animal, or they can rise above the level of even the Malaa'ikah. We have been created with that. Both in one person, you have both those things. Might not look like some people, you can easily see that person as an angelic nature. Other people who behave like animals, you can't believe that that same person also has an angelic nature in them. They were born with it. Nobody has been born without it. Every single person has been given both components. The higher self, the angelic nature, and the lower self, the animalistic nature. Now, what we are instructed to do in tasawwuf, when we talk about tasawwuf, it's actually the path of walking a path to purify your heart. And we'll come to more of those things, but it's a path of cleansing your heart and purifying it. It's a very specific path. It's a path that goes beyond just the Sharia. You're now almost at the second level of belief. If you're on this path, you're trying to find out, what can I do to become a better person? I don't only want to make salah and pay zakah and do all the other things. I want to get closer to Allah. What can I do? And this is the path of tasawwuf, where you embark on a path of what is referred to as a path of tazkiyah, purification of the heart. And this path is to ensure that we don't allow the nafs just to do whatever it wants. And we will speak a bit more about the nafs now in a bit more detail, other than just saying it is bad. But before I go to that, I think we must realize that nafs is not like the ruh of a person. The ruh of every person existed before the body was born. We'll come to that on the follow-up sessions and speak more about what is the ruh, so that we can understand what we're talking about. But for now, the ruh existed already. The nafs only appeared or emerged when the body was born. It didn't exist at all. When the body dies, the nafs dies. It doesn't have another life before or after the body. So it's closely linked to the body itself. And as people have indicated, its nafs are those qualities, the feelings, the desires, the urges, the passions that the person has. Now, it's not correct we are dealing it from the perspective that it is bad. But the nafs can also be good. It has the potential to be good, but its place from where it starts is actually that it is bad. It's a negative thing. Because we were all born, where does the nafs come from? And why is it so important? When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us, Allah created within us the nafs. The nafs comes from Allah. Everything comes from Allah. Remember that. If you say the nafs, shaitan also comes from Allah. Everything comes from Allah. Because if you say the nafs doesn't come from Allah, the nafs come from shaitan, and shaitan doesn't come from Allah, that's evil. You are saying that's another center of power or another creator for the bad and the evil that Allah doesn't have control over. That would make that, whatever you are saying, a partner to Allah. Saying Allah is only in charge of the good and creates only good, and the bad is created by shaitan or whoever else you think. No, that's wrong. There's only one creator. That is what our Tawheed teaches us. Allah created everything, but everything was created with a purpose. Allah created the nafs. Let me just, before I go there, let me make this point, clarify this point. So Allah created us with this instinctive, inborn needs to eat and drink, to seek safety and security and shelter and warmth when we're cold. That is inbuilt into our system. It's like the child that's born, it's not taught how to suckle the mother. The birds are not taught beforehand, do X, Y, or Z when you leave the nest. When they leave the nest, they instinctively have those abilities. And Allah put those abilities within us to go and satisfy your hunger and your thirst, seek shelter and protect yourself. And those are the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created that help to preserve the human species. If Allah didn't make it necessary for us to eat by giving us these hunger pangs, some people would have died. They would have been so busy with their computers and stuff. They don't even know they must eat, and next minute they fall down there because the body couldn't cope anymore without the nourishment. So at a certain point, these urges grow so strong that it forces you to cut off from whatever you're doing to go and do that, so that you can continue the species. Tomorrow there will be another person, and that person will be driven by the same instincts, and they will in fact procreate and give, make sure that the human race continues. So that aspect of the nafs is good. To eat, drink, and seek shelter. It's very good. It's essential to human life. I'm going to come back to this because we understand now we must eat, we must drink. It's not something that you have a choice over. If you get too cold, you can withstand the cold. At some point, you're going to have to find a way of getting out of the cold. Your body won't allow you. Your body won't allow you to continue. It forces you to respond to this instinctive feelings and yearnings and urges to eat, drink, and seek shelter, and so on. The key thing about that is we should not allow it to run wild. If you allow the nafs to just do what it wants insofar as eating and drinking and procreating and all of those things, then it will take control of your life. So you can't allow it to, but it's a good, important thing. That aspect is important, and that aspect cannot and should not be killed. Now there's another aspect about the nafs, which maybe people did touch on. That's the obvious one. That's like you overeat and overdrink and so on. But what's the other aspect of the nafs? That's also bad. That's also dangerous. That's spoken about in the hadith and sunnah. Yes, Yahya? Tafadal? Your mic is not on.
So, Salie, what I, or brothers and sisters, make me laugh if I'm thinking wrong. The nafs is must your ego, your desire. So, if we look at it from what I understand, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders us to do the good and forbids us from evil. Allah clearly tells us that. Now, some people indulge in khamr, in wine and drugs. So that is totally killing the angelic part of the body. The way that I understand it, that is my understanding,
Okay,
Abu Tasali.
that's fine. Muhammad Fasih, you
But
want to add? Sorry.
So by that, you say, Ya ayyuhan nafsul mutmainna irji'i ila rabbiki radiyatan mardiyah. Oh, you complete and kamil nafs. Now you have come to rest. That is when we're going 6 foot 6. So, yeah. So, like I say...
we'll come to that. We'll come to that.
Oh, okay. Oh, maaf, okay.
Muhammad Fasih.
Wa alaikum salam, Brother Salie. Wa alaikum salam to everyone else in the room. When we talk about nafs and we speak about this aspect, the animalistic almost aspect of human being, the things that drives a person, the desires that drives a person, what it seems almost as is it's like a trained animal. It's the animalistic part of ourselves, but it's almost like training an animal. You can either have a dog or a puppy that is disciplined and knows when to sit and when to eat and when to this and when to that, when to bark and when not to bark, or he can just do whatever he wants to, which will lead ultimately to his destruction, to the destruction of the people who he's in contact with. So similarly, I see the same kind of training process taking place in terms of this. It seems almost as if the way that we starve our nafs and our ego, as Uncle also mentioned, is in a way how we begin to train that animalistic part of ourselves, because it's not sophisticated. I would say the nafs is not sophisticated. The human being, his intellect, his spiritual self at a high level is sophisticated, but the nafs doesn't seem is sophisticated.
Okay. Shukran.
Okay.
Yes, you wanted to come in? Yes, please do.
Yes. So the other aspect of the nafs that comes to mind is the sense of having to seek recognition, pride, ostentation, thinking one is better, thinking that looking down upon others, seeking fame and recognition, show off. And what also comes to mind, that one day Shaykh Hazim Hafizullah, he says how praising the nafs is so subtle that we can go from worshipping Allah to worshipping our own self. It is that so subtle, like the breeze of a wind. We can go from praising Allah, worshipping Allah, to worshipping ourselves, like the breeze of a wind. It can change so quickly. So I think it's also got to do with our intention. You know, what are we through our actions? What are we feeding? Are we feeding our nafs, or are we doing it in order to please Allah?
Alhamdulillah. MashaAllah. That was actually what I was looking for, Sidi Yunus. That is the other aspect. The other one about the eating and the greed and those kinds of qualities. Yes, we understand that, but I think the other one is where it refers to, as Sidi Yahya mentioned, what is known as the ego of a person. That is, ego is your sense of who you think you are. You as a person have a certain idea of who you are. Now, it's very closely associated with vanity, conceit, ostentation, showing off, wanting to be recognized, wanting to be seen as special. And the more the nafs is in, that aspect of the nafs is in control of you, it changes the kind of personality that you are. It also changes your behavior in what you will do and what you won't do. And in a sense, if it is so strong, then it doesn't matter what the Quran and the Sunnah is saying on the other side, because this thing is so strong. It's taken control of you that it determines what you do, and it determines your entire behavior. So that second aspect is a more subtle aspect, but a more dangerous aspect, because the moment you start seeing yourself as the person who is in charge of your own actions and behavior, then you are entering very dangerous grounds. As Sidi Yunus said, our Sheikh said, you can so easily move from worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and actually worshipping yourself as the person who is able to do X or Y, and you are so special that you are almost, in a sense, setting yourself up as a partner, which we will come to in more detail later. So, now, our lower selves, it's referred to as our lower self in Tasawwuf, or our animalistic self, because it tends towards doing things that's not good, that you are prohibited from doing. Or you do a good thing, but you overdo it to the extent where it becomes bad, like eating, for example. You eat to a point where you can't even stand up anymore. You feel sick, you feel bilious. But the food was so nice. Yes, the food was nice, but does it mean you have to go and almost kill yourself? Some people, they say they don't live to eat. They don't eat to live, they live to eat. And there's so much truth in it. They love food so much that it doesn't matter what else is competing for their attention. If it comes to food, then that is right on top. Now, that's one aspect of it. But it's important to say, yes, it's all those animalistic passions and cravings on the one side. But remember, the nafs, we are told, can be controlled. It can be subjugated. It can be tamed. It can be beautified. It can be made pleasing to Allah. It can be. It's a question of how. It's a question of how. Now, which brings us to, if you ask people now, if I must throw up the question, you're all going to say is to make ibadah, to worship Allah, our purpose on earth. Yes, that is definitely one of the understandings. Our purpose on earth is to get to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But it could also be described. Worship can also be, ibadah can be to try and find ways of getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to attain His love. We don't even understand what the word love means, but we want to attain it. One day we must just speak about love so that when we want to attain that, we know whether we've attained it or not attained it. How can you attain something if you don't know whether you've attained it or not? But it's also ibadah, as we have been taught on this path, is the task of purifying the heart to such an extent where you know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a path that many people embark on, but very few people actually reach the goal. The people who have actually reached the goal, apart from the prophets, are the awliya, the saints. And they are referred to as the knowers of Allah, because they've reached the point where their heart is so clean that they actually get the label of becoming a knower of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, from what must you purify your heart? If you say the heart, let me just pause here. Let me just pause there for a moment. We must purify the heart from what is other than Allah. Now, what is other than Allah? Everything that
Creation.
is not Allah. Everything that is not Allah, and that is creation. Yes? Shukran, Yunus. It's creation. Now, can you think, if you look into your heart, wherever you look in your heart, you're going to find creation. Is it not so? If you think, tomorrow when I get up, what are you thinking? After you said your shahada and you made your dua and your dhikr and so on, then you're going to get on with the world. You first have to check, did I throw in enough petrol? I must go to the garage. So you're talking about the car. Is the car ready to take you to X, Y, or Z? And then you're thinking of using the car to go to work. And then it's work. And then at work, you're so busy with X, Y, and Z, and you come back and then you're hungry, you eat, and so on. And okay, yes, you're going to make salah, but then your whole entire day, your life, is filled with created things. Or the things that you need to do to live on this dunya. To work, to eat, to clothe yourself, entertainment, going out with the friends, with the boys or the girls, or the family, even the family, children, and partners are part of what is other than Allah. You can attach so much importance to things that's other than Allah that at the end of the day, when shaitan comes and he whispers in your ear, say for example, your child comes to you, I forgot to tell you, daddy or mommy, but I have to go to a school meeting tonight. Whatever you've got on, you're so attached to that child and want to please them and want to see that they get fantastic marks and so on. So you do whatever you can and you put everything else aside. It doesn't matter what it is, whether you were going to go to a dhikr or you're going to be part of a Zoom session or whatever, you put it aside and that becomes now so important. Of course, you have to balance things out. It is important. But what I'm trying to say, even your children can be used by shaitan and the dunya and your nafs as a way to keep you away from Allah. Like your car, your job, your house, your clothes, your money in the bank, your garden. You think of what keeps you busy. What are the things that keeps you busy? All of those things, or let me rather say the majority of it, one can actually put in the category of being other than Allah. Now, it's an enormously difficult task because Allah has placed us on this dunya to live. Allah knows, Allah is our creator. Allah knew that we can't survive if we don't go and work. In fact, Allah instructs us, go and work, go seek your rizq. So, but I'm now getting involved in the dunya. I have to go and work. I can't go and work because I need transport. So now you save up for a car and eventually you got a car. Now you want a better car or you want to upgrade, or if you're going to go to work, you have to dress yourself. Now you dress yourself, you must be dressed. You can't go naked in the street, it's haram. But now you don't just dress up. You dress up to be noticed. You buy the kind of car to be noticed. You upgrade your house so that people can admire you. The nafs take these good things and it changes it such that you don't even realize it's got you in its grip, using all those things like house and car and dunya and all of the other things that goes with that. So we must remove the things in our heart that can be described as other than Allah. Now that is a job for every single person on their own. That's not something you discuss in a session like this. What is in your heart? What is in your heart? Allah knows. So you can't lie. Be honest with yourself so that you know what your job is, to actually remove that from your heart so that it doesn't have so much control over you. Okay, so because that's where we have to exercise our choice. Allah created us with the Quran and Sunnah on the one side, the nafs, shaitan and the dunya on the other side, and Allah put us in the middle. Now I'm giving you choice. I've created both. The Quran and the Sunnah and the shaitan, the nafs and the dunya. I want to see how you're going to behave. Allah says in the Quran, Allah created us to see who will be best indeed. In other words, how will we exercise? How will we exercise that choice that is so special to human beings? How will we exercise that? Now, what makes the nafs even worse than the shaitan? Imam Ghazali says, the nafs is your biggest enemy. He's even a bigger enemy than shaitan and the dunya, because the nafs lives inside you. It's part of you. When you are born, the nafs is born. Shaitan is an external force. The dunya is out there. We live in the dunya. Shaitan is outside. He whispers and he's around us all the time. But the nafs is inside. The feelings, the emotions, everything. Nafs is right there in the middle. He's in the house. He's not coming from the outside to rob the house. He's inside the house. You can go around wherever you want, wherever you want. And Rasulullah says, your worst enemy is your nafs. It lies between your flanks. It's said so beautifully, it doesn't need any explanation. The first part must though not be forgotten of what what we said, there's this good component of the nafs. The nafs, the need to eat, drink, sleep, procreate, to protect the species from extinction, the human species. If Allah didn't put that in us, we would have died out as a species. That's a good part. But we mustn't allow any of those things that's good at that level to be taken over and to allow it to just develop into monsters where it's allowed to run wild, to do its own thing. Because in the process, if you allow that thing to grow like that, you have no control over that. Desire to eat becomes greater than the hunger. And that is what we must do. And when we allow that, then it's in conflict with how we've been instructed to live our lives in a balanced and good way, and to actually control all of these things. Now, what I've done to end off is to actually do a little flowchart, or what we call an info. Ek het gehoord die word gekall 'n infographic. I've done that, and I want to just before we end off go through that, so that we have that as a basis. But before I put that up, I want to hear if there's any comments or questions that anyone would like to pose.
Salie?
Yes, Yunus.
Now that we've covered basically what the nafs is, I think for me that comes to mind is, what is our actual consciousness? What is our consciousness whenever we do anything? Are we conscious of doing it with the consciousness and the awareness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or are we just doing it by instinct because it's lekker or show off? Even our ibadah, we can make salah in order to show off and say, wow, look at me, I'm making perfect salah. Oh, they're watching me, I must straighten my back, or I must stay longer in sujood, people is watching me. So on that level of being within us, to me it's also and it's linked to the concept of having taqwa, which is not fear, but consciousness of Allah's hearing, of Allah's watching, seeing, all seeing, and Allah's knowledge. So just as a means of also trying to curb and prevent us from having the focus being on ourselves, and rather having the focus on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So even if we are with our families, to have the consciousness of, you know what, I'm doing this, whether it's making someone a cup of tea for the sake of Allah. I'm serving my spouse, I'm serving my parents for the sake of Allah. And immediately there's that ease, inshallah, when we then serve people with that aspect, inshallah.
Inshallah. Okay. Shukran, Yunus. Is there any other comment before we move on? Sidi Marwan, is there anything you wish to say at this stage?
Salie, all I have to say, I just wanted to know, you get where we talk about ritualistic perfection. When at the stage of our life, we have to learn how to do something, your prayer to Allah, as perfect as possible. There might be absence of consciousness, but that perfection in your ibadah, I find in that phase of your life as being important. And then as you become more conscious, then your emphasis is not on perfection, but more on the consciousness. But there have to be a phase in your life where there is just ritualistic. What would that be a good thought, Salie?
I must say, the question of where we start. Sometimes I remember Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam when the Bedouin relieved himself in the mosque. That time the mosque was outside against a tree, and the Sahaba wanted to hurt him. How could he do something like that? He instructed them just to clean the spot there and to leave the man alone, because at certain stages you do certain things. Like a person who enters Islam, you don't tell them you must go and do everything at the same time. First teach them step by step. And I think nobody gets perfect iman overnight. You have to start somewhere and develop the discipline to do things. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala assists you if you are sincere. So yes, at first it will be ritualistic, and that's how children are reared. That's why we are taught. Let the children start from making salah and fasting at a certain age, so that they can develop the ritualistic things. Unfortunately, Sidi Marwan and everyone else, the sad thing is many of us remain in that ritualistic mode. We do the salah because we must do it. We've been told, our mothers and our fathers told us, and we must set an example to the children, so we do it, and we never get to the point. And part of the reason why we never get to the point where we do it with true iman and taqwa is because we don't understand what we're doing. We only do it because we've been brought up and told all the years, you must do it, it's important, if you don't, you're going to go to Jahannam. But we don't really get the full feeling of what it is that we need to do. But as you start with the process of getting to know who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, and He instructs you to do certain things and to leave other things, you start understanding, and you are given the wisdom to see why you are doing it. And once you know things, start doing things with understanding, then comes the sincerity and the iman and the taqwa that goes with it. So, yes, I'm going to go over to the next point, which is my infographic. I must share this. See, the technology is going to be with me as a problem until I die. I'm too old for this world. So the first thing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created of human beings was our ruh. Now the ruh, we're going to speak about this as a topic on its own, so that we don't just talk about the ruh and we say that is what the angel of death takes when you die, and that's what's blown into you when you are born, and that's all we know. We have to know a bit more. There's not much we can say about the ruh, but except to say that the ruh is who you are. You are not your body. Your body is a temporary vessel that Allah deposits the ruh into. And after your body dies, the ruh is taken out and it goes to another type of body and another type of body till you go eventually to Jannah or Jahannam, and it will go into another type of body. We'll speak about that, time allows. So the ruh was the thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created of human beings. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put the ruh, the home of the ruh. Where is the ruh? If you take a person that's alive and you cut them open, will you be able to find the ruh? The ruh is invisible. It resides in the physical body. And without the presence of the ruh, there is no life in the physical body. But the ruh itself is not a physical thing. But the home of the ruh, where it lives, is the heart. Now the heart, when we say the heart is not the object on the left-hand side of a person. It's not the piece of flesh. The spiritual heart is something that is difficult to describe. It's an invisible, non-physical thing, and the home of the ruh is the heart. And now comes the thing about Allah gave us the Quran and the Sunnah. Allah created us, but Allah wanted to make sure that He's not just creating us and leaving us on our own. Allah gave us the Quran and the Sunnah to tell us, I've created you human beings. Here, I'm giving you the guidance. If you want to succeed on this dunya, here is the book, and here is my messenger, and he will show you how to live your life in a way that will be pleasing to Allah. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also, Allah created the nafs, the shaitan, and the dunya. Now, if you look at this, let me just, where's my pointer? Pointer options, laser. I don't know if you can see my laser pointer. Now, these three things here, that represents, generally speaking, it represents the bad. Is the nafs bad? Mainly, but not totally. It can be beautified. Is the dunya bad? Its attractions are bad, but let me just say something about the dunya. This is the only place where we can attain Jannah. Your place and your time you spend on the dunya is extremely important, because how you live your life here on the dunya is going to determine where you're going to land up in the akhirah. But for our purposes, the dunya is seen as one of the enemy forces. The nafs and the shaitan, the three of them are in an alliance to distract you from what? To distract you from following the Quran and the Sunnah. Where do they battle? What's the battleground? The battleground is the heart and the mind. But how does it work? Is it separately, they all three attack the mind and then they leave the mind and then they go to the heart? No. How the mind and the heart gets affected by the Quran and Sunnah on the one side, and nafs and its partners on the other side, determines what choices we're going to make. Of course, your ruh, without your ruh, there's no body. So the actions of the body require the ruh in terms of it being the life force. Your choices are generally, at first, especially when you're still young, a baby and you're growing up, then your actions are controlled by the mind. Some of it would be controlled by the voluntary part of the mind, and some by the subconscious part of the mind. But your choices can also be determined by the heart. So which one, I mean, is it that the mind and the heart just speak together at the same time, and then somehow or other you make your choices? It actually doesn't work like that. The heart and the mind are speaking to one another all the time. All the time. They're in a constant dynamic two-way communication from the time you grow up to be a thinking adult, mukallaf, you've reached puberty, you're a thinking adult. From that time until you die, the heart and the mind is constantly speaking to one another and trying to influence one another. So if the nafs manage to control your heart and the nafs influences the heart, say for example, let's use an example. You like food or you like chocolates. You like chocolates. The nafs, the love for chocolates is so strong that the feeling is transmitted to the heart. Then eventually the person says, I love chocolates. And you actually say it, you love chocolates. And that feeling comes from the heart. It doesn't come from the mind. You have developed that love for chocolates in the heart. That love for the chocolates is transmitted to the mind and say, listen, I love chocolates. The mind is persuaded by it. And the mind says to the body, go buy some more chocolates or take out the other packet of chocolates. Sometimes it can be that the mind is exposed to certain things that it, for example, reads, it sits in a lecture and you're listening with your mind. It influences you to such an extent where you start thinking, maybe I should be doing things differently. And as you do that, it affects the heart. So we're talking about the chocolates. You've read somewhere that it's bad for your diabetes or whatever, and it makes sense to you, and then the mind speaks to the heart, and depending whether the heart is persuaded, the heart goes back to the mind and says, okay man, don't go and buy the chocolates. And these two things speak to one another about everything until the day you die. So the heart and the mind constantly speak to one another. But the things that influence them on this side is the dunya, the nafs, and shaitan. It's a constant three-way attack on the heart and the mind. If they control it, yeah, it doesn't matter what's coming, what the Quran and the Sunnah says. Your heart is filled then with the things that come from the side. And what happens is the body is instructed to do what these three things do, yeah. And as we were told, the nafs is your worst enemy because it lives inside you. It's the chief amongst the three. It's the head of this alliance. The nafs is the head of this alliance, this tripartite alliance. So can we see how dangerous it is? The nafs can be good, but if we allow the nafs to become wild and uncontrolled, it can take over the heart and the mind, and as a result, it takes over the actions and the choices of the body. So it's important for us to make sure. I'm going to end off on this slide, but there's much more to say about the nafs. How do we actually fight it, and what are the other things that we have to know about the nafs, and how to recognize the nafs in action other than what we've mentioned previously. So I want to leave the slide up here and ask, I'm going to end off on the slide now and ask if there's anyone who would like to pose a question on this, or anyone would like to make a comment on this flow diagram that I've presented here? I'm opening the floor.
But Salie, if I may
Yes.
ask, we see the tripartite alliance there being reflected as Shaitan, the Nafs, and the Dunya. In the month of Ramadan, Shaitan is removed from the equation. How does that then affect the balance? Because we still see people performing actions that are contrary to the best practice of Islam. And we still see people doing wrong things in the month of Ramadan, although there is a sense or an inclination towards wanting to do more good. So how do we understand that? Because Shaitan is one of the factors, and the Nafs is another factor in the dunya. So how is the balance then affected, or is it affected at all?
A very good question. Firstly, what we must recognize is there's not one entity here. There's three separate entities. If you were totally in control of your nafs, and you were totally in control of the temptations that the dunya presents, and the shaitan was removed, then you could say there's nothing negative that drives you. The reality is, even with shaitan out of the way, your biggest enemy is still within your own body, and that's your nafs. And the temptations of the dunya is going to be there all the time. You know it yourself. Things that you don't see normally, especially when it comes to the opposite sex. You see women see men, and they just appear out of the blue in front of them. It's Ramadan. The temptations of the dunya are still going to remain. Your nafs is still with you. So even if shaitan is there or not, it doesn't mean that all those other things, so all those things that you blamed shaitan for, in fact, is not honest. It actually doesn't come from shaitan. It probably comes from your nafs or your attachment to the dunya.
Sheikh,
Yes.
I wanted to ask I'm looking at the slide, and I just wanted to check a little bit of my understanding, because I can understand that the heart for me represents what inspires me. It's my inspiration. That's how I understand the heart, right?
Yeah.
I just need to clarify what the mind really means, because obviously one is very informed by psychology, and so if I look at mind, I want to understand mind as sort of more an intellectual governance of myself. That part, or maybe my executive self, the self that can make the decision maker. So I just need to make sure that I understand that the heart is what inspires me. It's almost as if the heart for me is more like the psychological part of myself.
Okay.
Yeah, so I would like Sheikh just to clarify for me. Shukran.
Okay. Is it Shahida? Is your name Shahida?
Yes, my name is Shahida.
Okay, Shahida. Shukran for the
Shukran.
question. Shahida, yes, it's a very good question, very deep. We're going to come to a section later on that explains the relationship between the mind, the heart, and the ruh, and the nafs later on. But let me just give a quick answer. The heart is a place that can be influenced. It doesn't have a permanent role that remains intact. The heart can be swayed from one to another depending on the influence. So the heart's influence can be affected by the, let's just say, Nafs and the Quran and Sunnah. Those two forces constantly attack the heart. And in the same way, the mind's role is the link to the actions of the body. But the mind can also be considered as a gateway to the heart. You can get to the heart through the mind. We're actually going to go a bit too deep, but let me just do this anyway. If you look at I actually need to put up another slide, but let me just quickly say this. The heart is able to deal with issues of the ruh and understand the ruh. It's the home of the ruh. It's the link to the body and the unseen world. That's the role of the heart. Whereas the mind is the organ that is in charge of the actions of the body and its behavior. What the body will do. The body won't just do things. It is controlled by the mind. But what affects the mind could either be the heart or any of these three things here at the bottom, or the Quran and Sunnah, but the mind cannot enter through the door of the unseen world. This heart has a very special role. We come to that. In fact, we have a whole session on the role of the heart and to understand it. So in essence, the heart is our link to the unseen world, and the mind cannot enter through that, but it's a gateway to the heart. So if you can speak to somebody and it makes sense, that impact that it has on the mind can be transferred to the heart, which can make the heart change whatever view it might have as the heart on a particular matter. And then it speaks back and forth to one another. It might not be sufficient for now, but for the time that's left, that's as far as I can go with that explanation. Is there anyone else who wish to make the final comment or ask a question?
MashaAllah, Salie. May I speak?
Yes, of course.
Oh, subhanallah. MashaAllah, our brother, I think his brother Yunus Ismail has pointed it out so nicely, how our nafs influences us. When we go and we're in front of people and we make our salah and we make up, down, touch the ground, back to town. You know what I'm saying? And over the years, we're making certain du'as and we're making certain adhkar and certain rituals. But we as human beings, or being born Muslims, some of us, we don't really understand Arabic, so we don't actually know what we are saying. That is why the reason why it's having no effect on the heart. So what I have discovered from myself personally, I try to change it to English. So when I talk to Allah, I talk in English, in a language that I can understand what I'm asking from my Rabb. So even if when I make my dua also, I change it to English, so that the reality must kick into the heart, and you will feel the difference, how that sincerity kicks in. And you don't worry about the people that is around you, because you're not coming here for name and fame, because you're asking Allah to protect you from Riyah. and you're asking Allah to protect you from the wish-wash of the shayateen, from its whisperings, and you're asking Allah to grant you to have that khaya, to have that modesty. So, yeah, mashallah, man, I've learned a lot, man, subhanallah.
Shukran. Yeah.
And, Brother Salie.
Yeah. Can I just say, Shahida, if you don't mind, don't call me Sheikh Salie. Just call me Buddha Salie. I'm not a Sheikh. I'm not an Imam. I'm a scholar of the Deen.
When Daddy called you?
Is there any final comment or question before we make
But Salie, I think when one refers to the mind and the heart, the words of Sheikh Abdul Hadi, Hafidullah, comes to mind. We said the mind is there to make logical sense, that to make logical sense of things, and the heart is there to experience it. And specifically referring to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that the mind is there to make logical sense that there must be a creator, and the heart is there to experience him.
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. We're going to speak more about the questions of the heart. For now, I think the message that we wanted to get across, in essence, is the nafs must be understood, and the aspect of the nafs that we are more concerned about is not, for now, the fact that it can be beautified or tamed or controlled. It is that it is evil and we must fight it. That is the first aspect of the nafs that we are dealing with. There's 2 or 3 other sessions that will follow that deals with the nafs in relation to the heart and the mind and so on. And then we're going to go through a special one again, where we're going to deal with the purification of the nafs. The 7 stages of the nafs we're going to go through. That's a different session again. So there's a lot to do to understand. But for now, let's not get into the other areas too far about the heart and the mind. We're going to come with that, to that. But I hope that we've laid a basis, inshallah, on which to build. And next week, we're going to be continuing with this. It will probably take another 2 or 3 sessions for us to complete this. And maybe, Yunus, what you should do, it would be good if you could put on the chat all the different topics that we are going to be discussing. If you miss out on one of these topics, it's going to become difficult to follow. And I would urge everyone to make special time. If we are dealing with a particular topic, try and make an effort to either sit in on the session, or if you can't, then go to the Zoom, the YouTube channel, where all of these things are uploaded. And even to refresh your memory about what was said, in case there was something said that you forgot or didn't understand, then you can go through it again. But use that YouTube channel, Salie Manie YouTube channel, and all the Zoom sessions are uploaded on there from the beginning. I think there's more than 50 on there. So I hope, inshallah, you'll make use of it and that you'll join us for the next session. And shukran for your attendance. May Allah be pleased with all of us. Open our hearts and our minds that we actually benefit from this knowledge, not only so that we can say we know, but we can actually take the knowledge and actually live the knowledge. We must become, or try to become, of those people who will live Islam. That is what our deen is. Our deen is a way of life. And for it to become a way of life, we must take those things that we are taught and live it. And if we live it, then we can say Islam is a way of life for us. Otherwise, we go through rituals which we don't understand, And we are now trying to embark, and I want people to grapple with the issues. If you don't understand, say you don't understand. There's absolutely nothing wrong. We're all learning from one another, and may Allah make it easy for us to grow in the process and to get closer to Him. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide all of us, our children, our family, our friends, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shower His mercy on Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and our Sheikh. Going to ask Sidi Yunus to make dua for us.
الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم. يا ربنا لك الحمد، يا ربنا لك الحمد، يا ربنا لك الحمد. الحمد لله على نعمة الإسلام والإيمان والإحسان. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد عدد خلقي ورضا نفسي وزنة عرشي ومداد كلماتي. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. نتقربا إليك يا أرحم الراحمين. ربنا اغفر لنا وارحمنا وعافنا واعف عنا. اللهم طهر قلوبنا من النفاق وأعمالنا من الرياء وألسنتنا من الكذب. ربنا زدنا علما وارزقنا فحما وزدنا بالصالحين. اللهم افتح لنا فتوح العارفين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وادخلنا الجنة مع الأبرار يا عزيز يا غفار يا رب العالمين. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وأصحابه وبارك وسلم. ألا إن أولياء الله لا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون الذين آمنوا وكانوا يتقون. دعواهم فيها سبحانك اللهم وتحيتهم فيها سلام وآخر دعواهم الحمد لله رب العالمين.
Shukran jazilan, Sidi Yunus. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh to everyone. Shukran for joining us, and I hope you will join us next week, inshallah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. جزاكم الله خير الجزاء.
السلام ورحمة الله.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Muhammad Fasih, I'm going to phone you in the next minute, inshallah.
Inshallah, khair, inshallah.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.